The scariest thing on your desk is not a quiz. It's a blank page. It sits there like it has all day. White, empty, a little smug. Your brain starts the usual slideshow. What if the first line is bad? What if this is not a poem? What if I look like I'm trying too hard? Meanwhile, the page does nothing. Pages are very patient that way. Here's the good news. You don't have to defeat the whole page. You have to put one true thing on it. A sound, an object, a first line that is close to what actually happened. Then another line. That is the job, not become a famous poet before lunch. Start. Last time, we talked about the bones of a poem. Things, lines, rooms, a voice. Those tools only work if you pick them up. Today is about process. The habits that get words onto paper when inspiration does not text you back. By the end of this lecture, you'll know that process is a habit, not a mood. You'll know how to catch a line before it disappears. You'll have a way to start when the page feels huge. You'll know how to open near the action and how to tell if a draft is doing its job. And you'll write something today that doesn't have to be perfect. It has to exist. So get your notebook. The page can wait one more minute. You should not. We aren't going to stare at the blank page and hope it blinks first. Here is the challenge. Think of one ordinary moment from the last day or two. Maybe it was the bus, at your locker, maybe the kitchen at home, sidewalk, the 2 minutes before the bell. Nothing dramatic is required. Boring is useful. You have about 5 minutes. Write a first line that includes a thing, something you could point at, not, I was tired. The backpack strap, the wet step, the dent in the locker. Then keep going. Add 6 to 8 more lines without stopping to make them good. Do not erase. Do not restart because line 3 felt awkward. Awkward is allowed. Stopping to decorate is the trap. If you freeze, use the first line and then leave it behind. Here's where we start. The door was still warm from somebody else's hand. Right. When you have that first line plus 6 to 8 more, press play. If the page is still white, stay paused. Starting here is the assignment. Now, pause this video. Okay, we're back. If you have lines on your page, you already beat the blank page. They don't have to be good yet, they just have to be there. When poets talk about process, they don't mean a secret potion. They mean the ordinary stuff around the writing, where you sit, what you write with, what time you can steal, how you feel when you start, and what you do when the first draft is messy, which is always. Some writers light a candle. Some need headphones. Some write in a kitchen that smells like toast. There is no official uniform. If you've been waiting for the perfect cafe and the perfect pencil and the perfect thunderstorm in your soul, that is a very expensive way to write 0 poems. Process is also how you approach the page. Can you say what you mean? Can you say it in your own words? Can you say it with fewer words than your first try? Working a poem again is not a punishment. It is the job. Here is the comparison I want stuck in your notebook. A beginning pianist does not walk in during week one and perform a symphony. Nobody serious expects that. They expect scales. They expect missed notes. They expect showing up. Poetry works the same way. You should not expect a perfect poem because it is Tuesday and you have a notebook. Write every day if you can. If you can't, read a poem every day. Make it a habit, like charging your phone. Except this habit actually gives you something back. Inspiration is nice. Habit is how poems get built. Poetry has an unfair advantage over painting. A painter needs an easel, paint, brushes, and a canvas that doesn't fit neatly in a backpack. You need a pencil and a scrap of paper. That is the whole official toolkit of poets everywhere. And everything else is extra. The rule is simple. Do not get far from something you can write with. Lines don't wait politely by your locker until your schedule opens up. They show up in the hallway. They show up when you are half asleep. They show up and then you leave. Then they leave. Practicing poets write them down. They don't say, I'll remember that later, because later the line has already caught a bus. Keep more than one notebook if you can. One that actually lives in your bag. One that stays near where you sleep. One that is allowed to look ugly. A fancy journal that you're afraid to mess up is not a toolbox. It's a museum. Use the cheap notebook. Use the back of a worksheet if that is what you have. The poem doesn't grade your stationery. A lot of poets like the feeling of a hand moving across paper. The pencil makes you part of the machine. Typing can feel like the words appeared by magic, and magic is harder to trust. That choice is personal. If a pencil feels good, use a pencil and keep a backup because a dead point in the middle of a good line is a tiny tragedy. If a pen feels good, use a pen and keep a second one. Richard Hugo warned that ink can trick you into thinking the words should never change. So if you write in pen, remember, crossing out is allowed. Crossing out is process. If you draft on paper and then type it, that typing can be a second look. You might cut a word. You might hear a better line. That still counts as writing. If you draft on a computer or a phone, protect your drafts. The danger of a screen is that version 2 can erase version 1 forever. A move you liked, a strange verb, a leftover image disappears and you cannot get it back. Save copies. Print a draft if you can. Don't let the machine keep only the latest version like it knows best. In this class, we use that on purpose. Handwrite to generate and explore. Type to revise, polish, and publish. Paper is for catching the line. The screen is for making the line stand up. One more toolbox fact, and it is weirder than it sounds. What you write on can change the poem's shape. William Carlos Williams used to write on a prescription pad. A lot of those poems are short because the paper was short. Another poet wrote a long, skinny poem on adding machine tape, and the poem came out long and skinny. If you write on a giant page, your lines may wander. If you write in a tight margin, your lines may stay small. That is not a rule you have to obey. It is a reminder that the page is part of the tool. You don't need a perfect desk. You need a way to catch what shows up. You also need a place, not a cabin in the woods, A spot where nobody is reading over your shoulder and asking if you're done yet. Writing is hard enough. It gets close to impossible when someone is hovering like the page is a group project. Where you sit changes what comes out. The cafeteria writes different poems than a quiet corner of the library. Your bedroom writes different poems than a bus window. You may have one or two best spots, and that's fine. Just do not marry them. A change of location is sometimes the whole spark. New room, new eyes. If the page is still not if the page still will not start, change something small on purpose. That's not cheating. That is breaking a habit that was not helping. Change the paper. Flip the notebook sideways. Write on graph paper. Use the back of a recycled handout. The brain notices. This is not the usual worksheet, and it loosens its grip. Change the place. 10 minutes on a different bench, a different table, a walk first, then sit. Write a letter that does not have to be sent. Pick a real person. Tell them one true thing in lines instead of a paragraph. You can keep it in the notebook. The point is to get words moving. Or set a timer for a short burst, 10 minutes, 15, 30 if you have them, and finish a draft whether it is good or not. Nobody said the first try has to be framed. It has to get written. You can revise later. That is what later is for. Solitude plus a small change beats waiting for the room to feel magical. Let's talk about the muse, because writers love to blame their muses. In the old stories, the muses were the ones you asked for help with a poem, a song, a play. Some poets still like that idea. Fine. You can ask, you can joke, you can stare at the ceiling and say, a little help would be nice. What you may not do is wait. The muse does not text. She does not RSVP. She does not arrive because your notebook is new and your pencil is sharp. If you sit there until you feel inspired, you will become an expert at sitting. Write without her. Write when the page feels rude. Write when the first line is only okay. That is not a lack of art. That is the job. If you want a muse that actually shows up, read. Reading a poem fills you with other people's rhythms, images, and nerve. Your own thoughts start to stick together. Poems beget poems. That is not copying. That is how ears learn. Try this, and we will use a version of it later. Pick up a poem. Read it to yourself. Read it out loud. Let one line stay in your head. Write that line at the top of a page and keep going in your own words. Fill a page if you can. Then credit the poet whose line you borrowed after so and so, or first line from. In this class, that is allowed as practice. It is not allowed as a finished poem you turn in if the first line were yours. Borrow to start, make the rest yours. Name the source. You just used another writer as a spark plug. The blank page lost. Margaret Atwood said blank pages inspired her with terror. What will I put on them? Will it be good enough? Will I have to throw it out? Most writers feel some version of that. The answer is the same every time. Put something on the page, then decide. Don't wait for fire from the sky. Steal a little heat from a poem you already like, and then do your own burning. A first line has one job. Make the reader want the second line. That is it. It doesn't have to summarize your whole life. It doesn't have to sound like a museum label. It has to pull. If the opening is vague, sleepy, or 10 miles from the actual moment, the reader puts the poem down and goes back to their locker. They will not say this out loud. They will just leave. Begin close to the central action. not the trip to the action. Elizabeth Bishop's poem, The Fish, is a good example of this, and you can find in it a lot of anthologies, and you can find it in a lot of anthologies. The poem is about catching a fish, looking at it hard, and letting it go. If it had started with packing the car, driving to the water, renting the boat, and baiting the hook, that would have been an essay about errands. Getting there is not the poem. The catch is the poem. Start there. Robert Frost said a poem begins with a lump in the throat, homesickness, love sickness, some pressure that wants words. Then the feeling has to find a thought, and the thought has to find the words. Your opening is where that search becomes visible. For beginners, here's a practical rule. Get a thing into the first line, a concrete noun, something a person could see or hold. Imagery is the fabric good poems are made of. I was sad is a weather report. The porch light was still on at noon is a place. You can fudge this later when you have read more and your ear is meaner. Right now, give the reader an object and a little action. Every poem needs a different opening. The shared requirement is the same. It should beg the reader to continue. Boring and imprecise will not do that, no matter how sincere you felt while writing it. Here's a revision trick that saves a lot of drafts. You often write your way into the poem. The first stanza is you clearing your throat. The good line shows up in the middle or near the end after you have warmed up. When you revise, hunt for that sentence that actually has heat. Try it as a line one. Rearranging is not cheating. Rearranging is how openings get built. Now for endings. An image at the end often works because the reader can still see it after they leave the page. Ideas fade faster than pictures. If the body of the poem is already packed with things, wet straps, a tray, a torn ticket, you may be able to end on a thought. The thought has to be earned. It cannot be a bumper sticker taped onto a draft that never showed anything. Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken is the famous version of that move. The poem first puts you in a wood at a fork, looking down one path and then the other. By the time it lands on the idea of a choice that made all the difference, you have already stood at that fork. The idea works because the images did the work first. Also worth knowing, the two roads in that poem are worn really about the same. The ending is a claim a speaker makes later. Readers still argue about it. That's fine. The craft lesson is not always moralized at the end. The craft lesson is if you end on an idea, pay for it with things. So open near the action with a thing if you can. End on an image or an idea that images have already bought. If the first line is timid, steal a better one from later in your own draft. You wrote it, you can move it. Sooner or later, you will ask the dangerous question, is this any good? Here's the honest answer. In poetry, good is partly a taste thing. People will disagree. What is easier to spot is not working. Vague, private, and foggy. You can't guarantee a masterpiece. You can run a few checks that make the poem clearer and stronger. First, the senses. If a reader can see, hear, smell, taste, or touch something in the lines, they can stand inside that moment. It was a rough morning is a caption. The burnt toast, the wet backpack strap, the bus hissing at the curb, those are the morning. Concepts are weaker than things. You already practiced that. Keep doing it. Second, did you say what you meant? A poem is not a pot roast. There is no timer that dings, done. Some drafts never feel finished. Some come out fast and still work. When you have said what you were trying to say, or you can name what is still missing, You may revise or you may set it aside overnight. If it feels hollow, stay with it until the intention is actually on the page, not in your head, on the page. Third, words. Have you used the best word you can find? Have you been specific? Beginning writers sometimes write in a code only they understand. Secret nicknames, tangled sentences, language that sounds like poetry instead of meaning something. Your readers shouldn't need a decoder ring. If the poem is about your sister, write, my sister, then show what that relationship is like. Don't hide her behind a label nobody else can unpack. One precise detail beats 5 pretty blurry lines. Not flower, red aster, not bird, the actual bird. Great poets are picky because picky is how meaning arrives. Fourth, another pair of eyes. Show the draft to someone who will tell you the truth kindly. A classmate, a teacher, a workshop. You don't have to use every comment. Even a little useful feedback is more than you had when the page was only yours. These checks will not make you famous. They will keep you from handing a caption, a microphone, and calling it a poem. Now you write. This is not extra. This is the lecture doing its job. For exercise 1, borrow a line to start. Our desired length here is 1 borrowed line first, plus 10 to 12 lines of your own. Open a poem you like, or use one line from a poem we've already read. Copy 1 line at the top of the page. Write 10 to 12 lines after it in your own words. At the bottom, credit the source. First line from and the poet's name. Don't turn this in later as if that first line were yours. Today, it is a spark plug. Exercise 2. Open on a thing. Desired length, 8 to 10 lines. Start with a concrete noun in line 1. Stay near the action. No warm-up paragraph about walking to the moment. No sad, awkward, or amazing unless a thing has already done the work. If the first line is timid, steal a hotter line from later in the same draft and move it to the top. If you finish early, write a third piece. 20 lines that repeat. 1 unusual word once per line. Not and, not the. Complete your attempts and then pause. Complete your attempts after you pause this video. We're looking for solid work, not perfect poems. Pause now. Press play when both of the required exercises are on the page. All right, go ahead. Pause now. Here's what I want you to keep from today. Process is a habit, not a mood. Catch the line when it shows up. Paper first is fine. Don't wait for a muse. Read, or just start anyway. Open near the action. Put a thing in the first line if you can. If the real opening is hiding in the middle, move it. End on an image or an idea the images have already paid for. Specific words beat secret code. If today's pages are messy, good. Messy means you started. A timid, perfect sentence that never leaves your head is not a poem. Next time, we stay with the notebook on purpose. Lecture 4 is about journals, why the extra words matter, and how poems hide inside the pages you thought were only practice. If the blank page still looks smug, give it one object and one honest line, then another. Start before you're ready. The page can catch up. I'll see you next time.